in the old days, I used to really enjoy building model cars as a hobby.
My father was born in the winter of 1931, and he was a genuine car fanatic. His soon-to-be wife, my mother, knew all too well about his fanaticism for automobiles. Growing up during World War II, he was fascinated with airplanes, including the Navy Corsair and the P-40 Flying Tiger. He would set paper planes on fire and then launch them out the windows of his attic bedroom. He joined the Air Force in 1950 with the escalation of the Korean War and became a mechanic servicing C-124 transport planes in California. Dad's dream car was a 1955 Rocket 88 Oldsmobile with GM's V8 engine, which paid homage to our nation's great space age. Adhering to Air Force color codes, he painted the tips of the fan blades yellow. As a youngster, I assumed all cars had yellow-tipped fan blades. Advancing from a Kroger butcher to an electronic technician at GE, he drove the sharpest van in the fleet. The high holy ground of racing in Louisville was a quarter-mile track located as a sideshow to the Kentucky Fair and Exposition Center. On hot summer nights, the armored gladiators would enter the asphalt arena with their fire-breathing dragons to do battle. I loved the roaring engines, the screaming tires, and the popping exhaust, and yes, the occasional exhilarating wreck that would bring the crowd to its feet. I can still remember walking in the pits, smelling the intoxicating aroma of gas and oil and the pungent odor of burned rubber. Given the rise in popularity of the four-cylinder VWs and Pintos, the fairgrounds created a mini-stock category, with engines screaming like hornets. There was another high holy ground of racing, and it was located at the Algonquin Shopping Center in western Louisville. It was called the Hobby House. The cars were a bit smaller, but no less intense, as we controlled our own destiny. And if your 12-volt motor could take it, you might occasionally push your luck at 18 volts, just to get an edge. And as if the weekly slot car action wasn't exciting enough, the Hobby House held a citywide annual model car competition with massive marble and brass trophies to be won. And while I failed to garner a trophy with my metal flake gold Volkswagen, I mastered the techniques of detailing the miniature cars, adding electrical wire for spark plug wires and brake lines, and engineering flexible suspensions. This investment paid off as I won the second place trophy with a customized 1945 Jeep just behind my brother with his detailed 69 Roadrunner. And when I wasn't busy building model cars, I was just as busy doodling and sketching cars, hoping that someday my cartoon strip featuring my favorite vehicles would catch on. The 1920s and 30s were heady years for automotive development. Any creative person with financial backing could design a car. Henry Ford revolutionized car manufacturing with the assembly line. Europe was not all that different. Joseph Ganz, a German-Jewish engineer, designed a compact car with an air-cooled engine in the rear and called it the Maybug. His first commercial vehicle, the Standard Superior, was on display at a national convention in Berlin in 1933. Adolf Hitler, enamored with the Ganz design, shared that concept with a more suitable and brilliant German engineer named Ferdinand Porsche. As Hitler's warmongering escalated, few Volkswagens were built, as the Wolfsburg factory was converted to churn out military Kubelwagens. With post-war reconstruction of the Wolfsburg factory championed by the British, Volkswagens began exiting the factory in 1946. The first dealer to bring the VW to America in 1949 was the wealthy Dutch businessman Ben Pon Sr. He sold two, making only enough money to pay for his return trip to the Netherlands.
The Volkswagen has no radiator problems. In fact, no radiator. The Volkswagen engine is cooled by air. Can't freeze in winter or boil over in summer. The Volkswagen engine's in the rear. You go in mud or snow. The Volkswagen cuts most gas bills in half. Ever wish you owned a Volkswagen?
A 1967 promo book titled Think Small was given away to owners by VW dealers. Top cartoonists of that decade drew cartoons involving Volkswagens, along with humorists writing automotive essays from the era. It was one of the most famous ads in VW history, created in 1959 by the Doyle Dane Bernbach agency. Ad Age ranked Think Small the best ad campaign of the 20th century. It countered the traditional focus of size, features, and fins by drawing on the humble character of the vehicle. Obviously, cigarette smoking was still pretty hip back then. the 60s and 70s, it was hard to miss the California beach scene and hot rodding culture. And Bruce Myers, a California surfer and fiberglass artisan, placed the first VW dune buggy on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. After that, VWs went mainstream. From Hot Rod magazine, they spawned their own VW magazines. VWs were cool and they attracted chicks. I spent hours poring over Hot Rod magazines and any other publication featuring VWs years before I could drive. And in the end, because of the Volkswagen's wild popularity, Peterson Publications had to print a total of 3 complete Volkswagen books. As a young man about to turn 16, I couldn't wait to start driving. I purchased my first Volkswagen for $500 in June of 1972, 1 month before my actual birthday. As a photographer and editor of my high school yearbook, I used my influence to ensure the proper placement of my bug in the 1974 yearbook, and I took as many pictures as I could of my constantly changing Beetle. Spending hours combing through J.C. Whitney catalogs for the next enhancements, I would transform my VW from my weekly bicycle repair paycheck. Upgrades consisted of simple door handles or a shifter knob to my coveted 60 Series Mickey Thompson rear tires mounted on American rims.
At Volkswagen, we don't worry about how our car looks. We worry about how it works. So every day for the past 25 years, we've been testing and torturing things like door hinges and hood locks, seats, and shock absorbers. No other car goes through so much for so little.
Most people are familiar with the groundbreaking car chase scene through San Francisco in the 1968 film called Bullitt, starring Steve McQueen. Most car enthusiasts might actually recognize the true stars of this film as the 1968 Ford Mustang and the Hemi-powered Dodge Charger as they ran amok through the hills and slopes of the treacherous downtown San Francisco streets. But they could be wrong. For in addition to the numerous VW Beetles and vans parked precariously along the downtown curbs, special attention should be given to the starring row of the green 1968 Beetle, whose sole purpose was to make the muscle cars look really good by timidly creeping down the asphalt slopes with the thundering beast roaring past it on numerous occasions. One can only imagine what the VW could have done if it was allowed to unleash its inner muscle car leaping on such similar precarious slopes. carnival pitched camp by my bicycle shop in the summer of '75 to support a sidewalk sale. A thief, encouraged by the chaos and clutter, stole my VW for a joyride. The police recovered my VW, responding to a hit-and-run accident, crumpled at the intersection of 3rd and Woodlawn. Innocence was lost that evening. My VW was forever transformed, gone were the deep blue panels, pinstripes, and rear racing stripe of my youth. After the professional bodywork, it would take 2 years before I could afford a complete paint job. With completed engineering degree and a job in hand, I purchased a more suitable car. I sold my Bug in the spring of '78. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. The Camaro became a part of the family and stayed with us for over 30 years. And along the way, I purchased the Jeep of my childhood dreams and shared it with my family. The salvage piston from my original VW engine was a constant reminder of my loss. And while I filled my life with many cars, my soul felt empty without my Volkswagen. Years later, I started collecting the small die-cast models from the Kroger store. I bought every variation I could. I would go another 20 years without having a real Beetle. Owning one again seemed like a distant dream. After sheltering my Camaro for 30 years, I discovered it was not a collectible year. When a friend asked to restore it, I was happy it was going to a good home. In April of 2013, a 1965 VW made a rare appearance on eBay from Kentucky. No Mickey Thompson 60 Series tires were protruding from under the fenders, but the chrome wheels and aggressive tires made the emotional connection. The ladybug floor mats that adorned my VW sealed the deal. The seller was asking $8,500. I would have paid $12,000. When I hesitated, he said, "How about $8,000?" And the keys were mine. Driving back roads across the Kentucky River was both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I was eager to park my new Bug in the special garage bay made secure by my Camaro for 20 years. I wanted to examine the details and specs of my new VW, reimagining its delivery fresh from the showroom floor. My Camaro had its own reincarnation, emerging from the shop with a blown 427 engine and a 73 nose. I want to believe it's happy. Stashed in the glove box of my new Beetle were some handwritten notes and 2 restoration photos that gave clues about its heritage. A warning to use 10W30 castor oil, a scrap of paper confirming Isuzu white paint. Fortunately, starting in '64, VWs were shipped pre-drilled from my Wolfsburg West seat belts and shoulder restraints. Urgently, I replaced the anemic aftermarket radio with a retro-look, all-digital AM/FM MP3 player. I was mostly satisfied after a thorough inspection of the car. However, I did discover the Achilles heel of my new purchase. A rusted floor pan had damaged and misaligned the pedal cluster. The gas pedal was only held in by the carpet edging. My engineering skills and bike repair ingenuity brought things back into spec. And another thing, I consider the aftermarket brilliant blue ignition coil to be an eyesore. With some store-bought spray paint, I restored the original colors of Bakelite and black. While data tables on the internet satisfied the accuracy of chassis and body serial numbers, a birth certificate obtained from the VW Museum in Wolfsburg confirmed the born-on date of Monday, December the 28th, 1964, just after Christmas. Additionally, ink stamped date codes confirmed pre-assembled parts in December of '64. Perhaps even more exciting, given that VW engines were swapped like underwear, was the discovery that my new Beetle had retained its original factory engine. But the biggest shock occurred when it was finally revealed that my VW was originally painted L595 Fontana Gray. Finally, the faded tag under the spare tire made sense. Then there was the matter of the sporty sun visor. Perhaps it was added to give the car a gangster look. Despite the flawless paint job, the eyebrow had to go, and after 2 years I mustered the courage to remove it. And while my VW is not a show car yet, it has been to a few events. And though my father's intensity about automobiles has lost some of its strength, there still exists this enthusiasm that attracts my family to annual car shows and motoring events. And while my dad never lived to see an actual NASCAR Sprint Cup race in Kentucky, his children have fulfilled that destiny. But it is on those hot summer nights when I'm crawling around the VW performing routine maintenance that I'm drawn back to the days that my dad helped me work on my first Volkswagen with sweat dripping from his face.
AJ Point will win the Indianapolis 500 in an incredible, thrilling finish.
L87 is a number I will always remember. It is the VW Pearl White paint code. The paint I used for the repair of my crunched fender on my first VW, the one I purchased 1 month before my 16th birthday. I spent that month honing my body shop skills. I learned about grinding and sanding and pulling sheet metal. I learned to apply body putty and swirling motions, wet sanding with 400 and 1000 grit paper. I became a sculptor, and that fender was my masterpiece. So for me, this Volkswagen will never be a trailer queen, although I do have plans for additional restoration. This car will always be a driven car, because the true joy comes not in just looking at the car, but actually driving it, running through the gears, leaning into the turns, and smelling the odor of the horsehair seat cushion.